Hello and welcome to the Popcorn Junkies. How does a cuckoo cuckoo? How does a cuckoo cook? Woo-hoo. This is a review of the film Cuckoo, essentially a German, French, American, English horror film starring Hunter Schafer, they being the actor from Euphoria, and this is a horror film. This is a curious horror film. It's from Neon, the studio that gave us Longlegs, and I think this film too has had quite a sort of innovative and nifty kind of press and publicity machine behind it, drip feeding it into the public realm. So this is a film about Gretchen. Okay, so she's called Gretchen, and Gretchen is a member of a family. She's a child in a family, a teenage child in a family, and her family are heading off to some strange kind of weird semi-suburban place in the German Alps, where her father and her mother, is she her mother, are joining essentially Gretchen's father's boss. That's the premise. But right at the beginning, just after the opening titles, we have a moment that kind of earmarks and prefigures everything, the horror of this film. And I have to say, this is a curious film. So much about it doesn't work, and yet when it does work, it really works, and in quite a sort of an arresting, innovative and interesting way. So the film starts with this incredibly enigmatic moment with a young sort of teenage woman. She hears a screeching sound in the woods, in the forest. It really is a film that tickles at the edges of the whole kind of idea of fairy tales. I do love a forest, so the idea that in the forest there yonder there's something making this weird kind of screeching sound which makes young women twitch. Right here you see this pulse go. It's a bit like Nanny Dye's eye when she's sort of telling you something kind of important. You just see that. It's a horrible screeching sound, and this screeching sound elicits from this young woman at the beginning of the film a sort of spasming and a sort of twitching, and she has a seizure, and then she legs it into the woods. That's your opening gambit, and you're like, oh, it's a bit creepy and all a bit weird. What the hell's going on? And then suddenly Gretchen with her family arrives, and her dad and mum are weird, and Gretchen doesn't look like she belongs. Cuckoo. You know, the whole idea of a cuckoo, it's horrible when you actually think about what a cuckoo does. You know, it goes into a nest. Does it take the eggs out? Does it look after the eggs? Does it eat the eggs of the other person? Does it lay its own eggs in that nest, get the other bird to incubate them, and then eat the other bird? Something like that. Something really quite hideous about the cuckoo. Anyway, Gretchen and her family head out to basically be in the German Alps, and it's a really weird kind of alpine suburbia. It was kind of giving me Twin Peaks vibes, and there was what was that other series that used to be on television, which was set, I think, in Alaska, and it had like elks walking around in the kind of opening title sequences. What was that? Oh, it's weird. And so it was a really weird but innovative and interesting setting. In fact, this whole film, the sort of colour palette and the grade on it is something like, you know, when you get the sort of sepia-toned 1950s perfectly square photos of your nan and granddad standing outside a bungalow, and it has that sort of bleached colour, but it's still a colour. But quite quickly you realise this is kind of horror, but it's horror with a very, very strong comic bent to it. Now, I keep kind of going to keep referencing Longlegs because it comes from the same studio. Longlegs at times, the Nick Cage film, had that comic aspect, but actually it was a very dark kind of nihilist comedy. This film has kind of comedy in a sort of quirky. It's kind of quirky, and in fact there were times in this it was so sort of tongue-in-cheek, it was so ridiculous, there were so many sort of ridiculous moments, and I'm going to talk about them in more detail. But like, for example, the boss of her father, who plays this stupid little flute that kind of, he's like the Pied Piper of Hamlet, just I mean, a lot of people in the cinema when I saw it were laughing out loud at how sort of ridiculous and surreal. It's incredibly surreal at times, but surreal and silly surreal at times in its horror. You're forever lurching between genuinely being unsettled and scared and just pissing yourself laughing, which, if you think of, you know, Lynchian, the term Lynchian gets used a bit too much. And doesn't really mean anything. It kind of just refers to odd. But the true meaning of, for me, Lynchian is actually really troubling and sort of goes into your marrow and makes you feel deeply uncomfortable about absolutely everything. This kind of makes you feel uncomfortable, but it also allows you to kind of laugh like an absolute drain. At times, the kind of tone and colour and feel and comedy in this reminded me of a Bob Balaban film from the 1980s, must be the mid-1980s, called Parents. If you haven't seen it, check it out. That said, it doesn't all hold together in this film. It does get a bit ridiculous at the edges, and sometimes just sort of feels just quite amateurish and confused. I mean, this script for this film, it often just doesn't make any sense. You don't know where it's going, why it's going there, and what anyone's doing. And in fact, once you even get a grasp of what the horror is, it still doesn't really make any proper sense to you. It's Gretchen's film. You know, we're seeing everything from Gretchen's perspective. She's employed by her father's boss to man the front of this strange Alpine hotel. But while she's there, she has curious conversations with the other woman on reception, and she sees lots of young women coming in and vomiting. People are being sick everywhere. And then her sister, you know, whilst she's playing guitar or listening to music, Gretchen, her sister hears the kind of screeching sound out from the woods, and you see the thing going again. And what dawns on us is that actually the horror in this film, the horror, and what you begin to realise is that the horror in this film is this screeching sound. What's making this screeching sound? And what we're going to discover at some point in the film, and I think you see it in the trailer too, is the screeching sound is this bizarre monster, this sort of feminine, cuckoo, humanoid monster with Jackie Onassis glasses on, whose mouth, when she screeches, kind of goes, and she's wearing a mac, and she's wearing sort of one of those old kind of almost headscarves that old women used to wear, you know, like in EastEnders, when, you know, with a fag, dot cotton, like a dot cotton thing. And she's the oddest kind of sort of monster, and kind of, but she's fucking scary. I'm not exaggerating. She's fucking scary. So like this scene where you know, Gretchen's playing the guitar, her sister starts to kind of hear the screeching, and is kind of like gets caught in this sort of, you know, again another spasm, another seizure, and she's sort of like, stuff's going like this, and you hear the and then like, she's being called to the cuckoo woman who's got glasses on and is dot cotton with a fag and a big mouth and a mac. It shouldn't work, but it does work. Gretchen keeps trying to kind of rescue or stop her sister from kind of freaking out and having this seizure, but you keep getting these kind of repeats of time. So it's like, so we have sort of time bending, we have sort of time repeats, we have scenes that repeat themselves and rewind and repeat themselves, and you don't really know why. And it's great, it's innovative, it's experimental, and it's a bit scary, but you're sort of thinking, why? It doesn't make any sense. What emerges across this film is the fact that there is a sort of human-like species, or her father's boss is, in a sense, like I say, the Pied Piper of Hamelin, controlling this creature that runs from the woods, who then comes in and essentially tries to, I'm still trying to piece it together, and essentially impregnates these younger sort of vessels, these younger women. So like, you know, Gretchen's sister, and is Gretchen there to have the same thing done to her? And the girl at the beginning of the film, you know, they're going to be impregnated, but the way in which they get impregnated, theoretically, we don't see it actually happen fully, is that they have a sort of hand covered in slime from this woman that kind of looks like she's going to insert it in their crotch. I mean, I kid you not, it's very, very strange. And so that's the horror. And the father's boss, this kind of curiously, really stilted, and you could say really badly acted, badly delivered, and badly performed, but because he's so bad. In fact, this film has a really interesting aspect to it. Many aspects of it are really amateur or amateurish, and you think that hasn't really been done well. But even in it not being done well, that kind of makes it creepier. So even his performance, though he's not exactly brilliant, he's funny, not meaning to be funny. He's amateur, not meaning to be, but he's kind of, because of all these things, because you don't quite know where to place him, you think, oh, he's a bit creepy too. So we have lots of moments of slippery arms, slippery hands that look like they're going to be slipped into the bodies of these younger girls and into their hosts. You have this screeching cuckoo-like woman who's running around and looking to kind of impregnate and put what? In what? I mean, what I couldn't quite understand is who was impregnating who with what, and why were they doing it? Why is this cuckoo-like process of creating new babies and people and creatures from this humanoid in the woods? Why was the boss doing this? I couldn't quite get a grasp on that, and yet everyone seems kind of committed to it, apart from Gretchen. And Gretchen, Hunter Schafer's very good at sort of looking ever more fucking perplexed. I mean, in fact, Hunter Schafer looks like a baby bird. I mean, just physically, the face. There were many times where I thought, God, you almost look like a sort of a chick. I mean, she's as confused in this film, Gretchen, as we all are watching it, because you're thinking, what the fuck is going on here? Why? But when it's scary, this film is scary, and this film has a really, really, really nifty first proper scary. You've got the first scene at the beginning, which is unsettling, but the first proper scary scene that's in the trailer is when Gretchen, Hunter Schafer, is on the bike and she's cycling through the dark woods. Who fucking cycles through dark woods at night? You can see this person starts to run, and you know that they're going to come into the back of shot. You know they're going to reach, and they do that. And there are some moments in this where the handling of the horror is top drawer finesse. This director, who is it, Tillman Singer, they're going to be doing some big shit soon, because Tillman Singer manages to sort of control the scenes of horror really quite beautifully, really quite in masterly fashion. And so you've got this sort of cycling, there's darkness, there's someone behind them, you've seen someone run out of a house from the side, tracking shot that then comes around, brilliant. So in the darkness there's some fucking mad fucking bint fucking chasing fucking Hunter Schafer. What's going to happen? And then they cut to a top shot where you see the shadow or the silhouette of Hunter Schafer's Gretchen's body and bike on the floor as she goes under the the street lights, and then suddenly you see the shadow of a hand coming. Literally screamed. There was a guy sat in the front row in front of me. I like to sit in the front row because I like to turn every cinematic experience into an IMAX experience. But the guy in the front row was so scared, I'm not exaggerating, his drink went up and all over the place. Every moment you get with the kind of, let's call her Dot Cotton, the cuckoo monster. Dot Cotton being an old character from EastEnders who had a kind of hairnet and a kind of mac and a sort of really effective and scary, and the shrieking, and the mouth would open and distort as she came towards Gretchen. So, this is all going on and you're thinking, fucking hell, well, it's scary, but I don't know what is going on here. I don't know why this is happening. Obviously, there were parallels to be made. Gretchen, the character, feels like she's not in her proper family. I think this film could have really pressed a little bit more, maybe, on the idea that many kids and many people sometimes feel like outsiders within their own families, or like they've been given, the idea that you've been given the wrong parents, or you've been given the wrong child, or something somewhere doesn't quite fit. I felt they could have taken this film to some of those thematics a little bit more obviously, but they didn't really. This kind of ended up becoming more and more kind of madcapped and lunatic and surreal. So you've got the father's boss with the flu, pulling it out left, right and centre, and he manages to control the young girls who are running around and kind of having seizures, and into which you presume they're going to be impregnated. But there was a point where Gretchen, Hunter Schafer's, in a derelict pool, and the guy with the flu, or the penny whistle, whatever you call it, is controlling the girl at the beginning of the film, who's also wanting to put her hand, weirdly, into the crutch, we presume, of Hunter Schafer. It's very, very odd. As I say, there were many moments in this where the script was incredibly Twin Peaksy. It was very odd. There were sort of great long years. There were moments where it was kind of, I think, unintentionally funny, but then there were other moments where I think it was intentionally funny. There was the cottage where lovers meet, which is another weird venue. A very powerful sort of set piece scene where the cuckoo woman comes into this cottage. Again, she was such a suburban sort of looking monster that it was almost creepier that she looked like just an old woman who made weird cuckoo sounds that wanted to shove her hand up your jacksie. It was just like two major characters though. There's the boss, and then there's this detective who's kind of been sort of, wondering that the detective's weird too. He's like, there's been something weird going on. What I could say to you right now is every single man in this film is deeply unsettling. Well, don't get me wrong, so too is the cuckoo woman. But every man in this film, what's quite clever is none of them are reliable, not even her father. And this film does speak to that thing of, I remember talking to the girls when they were younger, one of the things they found most scary about a film like Coraline wasn't even the horror of the jump scares and the nastiness and the monsters. It's the idea that the safety of a parent is disrupted and they could be evil, and they're not reliable, and they might not be your parent. And I think in this film you really feel Gretchen Hunter Schafer's kind of isolation from even her parents, who have got another agenda, maybe wanting more kids, or what I could not make head nor tail of what really their intention was. But then you've got this detective guy who's as mad and as unhinged as the guy with the flute, and there's poor old Gretchen in the middle trying to rescue her sister who's got this flapping fucking thing going on in her neck every time you hear the cuckoo screech from down the road. The cuckoo screech was deep. When you get the kind of nails on a kind of chalkboard, it freaks you out. This film is proper gonzo filmmaking. This would feel great in a triple or quadruple bill along something like, I don't know, Mandy, or any Nick Cage film in which some fucking weird shit happens. This is weird. I don't know if it's that intentionally. It was intended to be this weird. The dots don't connect. The logic, even when you have something weird and stressed, even a Lynch, you need a sort of an internal logic. Even if the internal logic of a film is illogical, you need it to kind of make some sense. And there were huge moments in this film that just didn't. A film full of dislocations. The open sound, often there was a sort of sense of the mic being open, gave you again that sense of an amateur feeling, of sort of almost documentary. That was quite creepy. That was good. It lent the whole thing a certain sort of, with open sound in a film rather than highly kind of produced closed sound, you feel anything could come in and shock you and surprise you, and that was quite effective. What I would say, sitting this alongside Neon's other release of the year, Longlegs, I personally thought this was infinitely more effective than Longlegs when it succeeded in its horror. I found this film infinitely more unsettling than Nick Cage's Longlegs, bar possibly the one moment at the beginning of Longlegs when you just see the top, bottom of his chin. I thought this was scarier. I thought this was, whereas Longlegs took itself a little bit more seriously, this really doesn't. This is kind of zany, and in its zaniness, it kind of sometimes sort of makes some of those scenes almost scarier because, you sometimes are lulled into a false sense of security thinking, oh, this is a bit silly and a bit funny and a bit light, and then suddenly you're yanked towards the absolutely most petrifying Dot Cotton horror story woman from a bus stop running at you with a mouth that's getting bigger and bigger by the minute. Great moment for Nanny Di in this. Someone dies at the hands of falling shelving units in a library. It's odd. This is an odd curiosity of a film. Batshit crazy, quite literally batshit crazy. If you saw a crazy bat shit in the middle of this film, you'd think, well, that makes sense. Of course it does. It's a bat. But instead it's a cuckoo. You don't actually see any inserting of anything into anyone. And I'm going to make a suggestion here that's a bit creepy and a bit disgusting. I think in a weird way, this film needed to go the extra yard. I don't mean yard arm. Oh God, yard arm. This is getting worse by the minute. I think this film actually would have guaranteed its status in the sort of cult stable of films that will forever be played at the Prince Charles late at night if they'd gone the extra yard arm. And I hate to say it, actually gone to the level of inserting body parts into other body parts to achieve whatever the thing was that led to the kind of glossy stuff all over the woman's arms, or various arms that looked like they were going to go in. It was very sinister, the fact that it never quite got to that point, but I felt we needed to go just an extra yard. Defo Gonzo filmmaking. I think as I say, it dropped the ball a bit. I felt there were lots of kind of thematics around the cuckoo, being in a cuckoo's nest, not living in your own family, not being in your own home. Hunter Schafer's brilliant. Hunter Schafer very much has to react to everything in this film, but Hunter Schafer looks and reacts to things suitably in a suitably horrified, bizarre and perplexed fashion, and it was really nice just to see yet another one of the kind of alumni, if you like, from Euphoria and all that kind of stuff, doing something completely offbeat. I mean, this is whacked out weird shit. What would I score it? I can't remember what I scored Longlegs, but I do think this was a more effective film than Longlegs, though there are huge moments in this that just make no sense and are a bit it's a bit cringe, it's a bit weird, it's just a bit empty. You know how like sometimes you get a pause on live TV and you think, oh, for God's sake, fill the silence. There were a few moments like that in this too. What would I give it? I think I'd have to give this 72. I just thought it was it kept me engaged. And if you fancy weird, check it out.